Hansa. Mapastim si Kasun. So you should all know me as White Horse. And today we're going to be gathering some muskiki, some medicines. So with today's video, we're going to be looking at wild mint, or Cree people we call it laboom, or the other thing we call it is muskiki wapoy, or medicine tea. But the Cree, normally I grew up hearing my Hokum and Musum call it laboom, and laboom is more of a Michif word adopted by the Cree in my area anyway, and I've heard all across northern Alberta, we all know it as laboom, but it is wild mint. And as with any plant, we're going to be harvesting this plant. And I know with a lot of my other videos, I like to reiterate how we need to be thankful for any of the gifts or medicines or anything we're taking from nature, whether it be an animal or a plant or anything, whether we're going to eat it or whether we're going to use it as a tool. We need to remember that all of these, every little plant out here is alive, every tree is alive. So we've got to be mindful of that and respectful of that, and not just go out and just start picking plants and just doing it without respect, because we were taught as Nihiawak that if we don't harvest things in a good way, then it's not going to do good for us, especially with medicine. So if we're picking medicine, something that's going to help us when we're sick, we're told if we don't gather it in a respectful way, then that medicine's not going to help us when we're sick. It's just gonna, it's the spirit of that plant isn't gonna come and help us. And I think it's just good. Just a good way of doing things is always being respectful. So with today's plant, we're going to be picking the wild mint, or laboom. I call it laboom or muskiki wapoy, and this is the laboom here. So I'm just, before I pick it and show it to you close up, I'm going to give my thanks to the plant and give my offering. Again, I'll be using steamau, just a little pipeful, and I'm going to give my thanks in as good as I can in Cree, and then I'll tell you the words that I'm saying in English, just in case you want to respect the plants in the same way. But as always, when we're being respectful, I remove my hat and I hold the plant that I'm going to be harvesting. So today it's this muskiki wapoy. So I'm going to be giving thanks for this before I pick the first one. So I only have to do this before I pick the first one. Once I've picked the first one and gave it offering, then I'm free to pick however much I need to last me for the season. So I give my thanks. How semanto nanaskamun hawa maskiki how musumnanak nukumnana kinanaskum tinawaw nanaskamun awa how magiwan how maskiki wapoy kinanaskum tin. I give thanks to you, oh Creator. I give thanks for the medicines that you give us. Grandfathers, grandmothers, I give thanks to you for all the teachings that you've given us. Medicine plant, wild mint, I give thanks to you for giving me the medicine you're going to give me. And I thank you. So now that I've given thanks, I can pick this wild mint. So with the wild mint, if you look closely at it, you can see that it looks, how the leaves go on it. It's got 2 leaves on each side that go all the way up, 2 leaves going out, and within each pair of leaves there's a little cluster of flowers. And usually when they're at the height of their growing, the flowers are purple. You can see the purple little flowers here. So again, 2 leaves, cluster of where flowers are. 2 leaves and a cluster of flowers. 2 leaves and a cluster of flowers. And it just keeps repeating, going back and forth throughout the plant. Just sort of like an offset ladder. But that's how it grows all the way up. And you'll see again the purple flowers when they do flower. And you'll see it's got a distinctive kind of a purpley color to the within the leaves. Now when I'm picking wild mint, we never take the root because we are not using the root, and we want to make sure that this mint is going to grow here for generations. So we break the wild mint off at the stalk. So we just break it off. When I'm picking it, I put it between my fingers and I just give it a twist and it breaks off. Some people like to use knives or scissors and stuff like that, but with us, Nihiawak, with Cree people, we're taught that whenever we're harvesting plants or anything like that, we're really not supposed to be using knives, because knives are, when you're taking stuff, especially medicines, with a knife, it's as though you're killing it. So you're taking that knife to it and you're cutting the life from that plant. And it's no different, we're told, than taking the root from the plant when we use a knife or anything. So we just break it off. That way what's left on the ground is the root is left there, and even these little parts sticking out will be able to grow from there. But if we take a knife and we cut it, it's going to be cut straight, and a lot of times that plant won't be able to grow from there. So it's good just to break them off. And that's what we like to do as Nihiawak, just to make sure the plants continue to grow in this area. And as with all things, we want to make sure that we're not taking every single mint that I've got in this area, not every single piece of Muskihiwa. I'm going to be picking just the larger ones and leaving all the small ones so they can grow and next year be nice and tall. Now when you're picking, especially with wild mint, you've got to be very careful, because there are other plants nearby that look very similar. And I'm just going to go grab one here just to compare. So usually wherever you're picking the wild mint, something else grows nearby which looks very similar. And this is thistle. So if you look at the thistle, it's also got purple little flowers, but it doesn't have 2 leaves and a cluster of flowers. You see the leaves are very similar, but they are different. Now with the mint, early in the season, they're all a green color like this, so it's easy to mistake it for the thistle. However, if you look closely, the thistle always has this really furry stem on it. And of course you can see the cluster where the flowers are, that's the thistle. So be very careful. And the leaves they're kind of furry. They're always kind of furry like that. With Muskihiwa, the leaves are smooth, it's not furry or anything. So be very careful that you're not picking thistle, because not only will you get really itchy, it'll get you sick as well if you're trying to drink this like tea. So make sure you're not picking the thistle, and you can see the difference between the two there. Similar, but there are differences. So again, we're going to be picking the Muskihiwa, and we're taught, we usually pick enough to last us for the winter. So throughout the season for the winter. So I'll be picking like a fairly big bundle. Once I do have that bundle, I usually take it home, kind of spread it out and let it dry, just like tea leaves. and we use it for many different things. With Maskikiwapoy, the laboom, especially used as a cold medicine. So if you got a cold and flu, we'd mix this. Sometimes we just drink it as a tea, uh, using it just like tea leaves, and drink that in a tea. Or we'd mix it with tea bags like black tea, and mix that in, and we call it Maskikiwapoy or medicine tea when we do drink that. But it's really good for colds and flus. And with our medicines, though, it's really used as a binding agent, or a plant that sort of brings out the medicinal value of other plants. So this is usually mixed with other plants as to sort of bring out the medicinal properties in other plants. But generally, most of the time, it's used just as tea by itself. Laboom tea, you'll see it, or mint tea at ceremonies and such. Very common and really preferred by especially our elders. They really like Maskikiwapoy. So again, I'll be gathering as much as I can of this to last me through the season, and then I'll be once I've got it in a bundle, well, I'll show you how I sort of separate it and tie it and hang it to dry. But for out in the bush, we look for where it's growing, and again, we do our offering. Once we've made our offering with the first plant, we're free to harvest in that area. So that's how we pick laboom or Maskikiwapoy. So with Maskikiwapoy, where do you find it? The most common places to find the wild mint is areas where there are kind of new growth poplar. So not old growth poplar, but you'll see the poplar behind me, how they're all maybe 6 to 8 inches across. So old growth, new growth poplar. Also, not just around those poplar areas, but a swampy area as well. So if you look at the area that we're in right now, you'll see we're just on the edge of a really swampy area, and it's normally that's where you'll find the wild mint growing, because it likes water. It likes really wet ground. Sort of on the edges of muskegs is a good place to look. But generally, where the ground turns from poplar groves into swampland or into muskeg, that is where you'll really find the wild mint or Maskikiwapoy easy, or laboom, or whatever you want to call it. But that's where you generally find it, in those types of areas. Easiest, where it grows the tallest and the thickest is usually if you can find a spot where, like I said, there's a poplar grove that moves into a muskeg, so it's right on the edge of where that ground changes and it starts to get swampy. That's generally where you'll find the mint. And it's actually not very hard to find if you're out walking or out quadding. Most often you're going to smell it long before you see it, because it is mint, and you could smell that mint from a fair distance off, or if you're just walking by it, you can smell it before you see it. Once you smell it, you're just looking for this plant. So that's generally the areas where you'd find the mint growing. Alright, so we're going to continue on with completing the task of preparing our Maskikiwapoy, or our laboom, our wild mint. And all we've done after we've come from the bush collecting it is I've just spread it out on a table to dry. It's not completely dry yet, but it's dry enough to finish the process to where it's ready to put into storage for whenever I need it, or just to make some tea. So the next process that I need to do is, all I've got is a nice big pan here, or a little big plate here just to put it in. So what I want to do is take each of my leaves, each of my plants, and I'm going to just wipe off all the leaves onto this dish here that I have, because most of the medicinal properties are in the leaves and they're the strongest. So, so I want to take the leaves off of each of the plants, and with this I'm not going to throw it away because there is still medicinal value in it. So we can still use it for a tea. We just have to grind it up and break it up. I usually just break it into small pieces and then grind it up, because we want to make sure we're using the whole plant. We don't want to be wasting any of it. And this still has some good tea flavors in there, and it's useful to use. So even if we get some stems in with our leaves, that's fine. So again, we just take each of our plants, run our finger down it so the leaves come off. Because again, we want those maskikiwapoy leaves in there, because that's where all of our flavor is, that's where all our medicinal value is in those leaves especially. Now these could be a bit drier, but that's fine. And again, I just put the stems off to the side to use for later, to grind them up or cut them up. But I'd go through this with every single one of my plants and take all of the leaves off and put them in my dish. So that the majority of my leaves are going into my dish here, and this, once they're all in here, I'm just going to let them completely dry in here. Because even when they completely dry, all of that medicinal value and the flavor is still in the tea. So it doesn't need to be moist or anything. It can be completely dry. And when you're doing this, you can, as soon as you start taking the leaves off, you can really start to smell the mint in there on this wild mint, and it'll really make some really strong maskikiwapoy. So I'll just continue doing that until I have all of the leaves off, and they're all in this dish here to dry.